The sound of screaming cuts through the roar of water. A stadium packed with families and tourists is gripped by horror as a massive orca thrashes violently in the pool. Trainers sprint to the water's edge, their shouts drowned beneath the deafening cries of panic. In the center of the chaos, one man fights desperately for his life. His arm breaks the surface for a split second, fingers trembling, reaching, then vanishing beneath the waves. The audience gasps, shrieks echo, and children cling to their parents. The dream of a man who lived for the sea has just collided with the raw fury of nature. His name was Daniel Cross, and this is the story of his terrifying last moments. Daniel's story begins far from the glare of stadium lights. As a boy, he spent hours along the shoreline of his hometown, eyes fixed on the restless ocean. The waves rolled endlessly, calling to him with a rhythm he could not resist. Friends remembered a child who seemed out of place on land, but alive when water touched his skin. He studied every book about dolphins, whales, and sharks that he could find, his fascination with marine life growing into obsession. Archival footage shows a young Daniel, not yet a teenager, volunteering at a small aquarium. His hands shook with excitement as he fed dolphins for the first time, and his eyes gleamed with joy. He had this energy, a former trainer later recalled, like the animals trusted him. He didn't want to control them, he wanted to connect with them. That energy never faded. Through years of dedication, Daniel rose to become one of the park's most charismatic trainers. He smiled with a warmth that could disarm any tension, and his performances felt less like shows and more like dances. Crowds adored him. Co-workers described him as the heart of the stadium. For Daniel, it was not just a job, it was his purpose. But behind the dazzling leaps and synchronized splashes was a different reality. The orca that Daniel worked most closely with was no gentle giant, but a restless predator. Towering over 20 feet long, weighing 6 tons, this apex hunter had been captured young, torn from its family pod, and thrown into captivity. 4 years, it had been paraded as a marvel of marine life, a living spectacle. But captivity takes its toll, and this orca bore scars not only on its body but deep within its mind. Former employees remember the warning signs. The animal sometimes refused food, sometimes lunged unexpectedly at trainers, sometimes stared with a stillness that felt unnatural. There were days, one staff member admitted, when I thought, this is going to end badly. But no one wanted to listen. Corporate management focused on profit. Full seats meant more money. A happy audience mattered more than safety concerns. And so, the shows continued, the warnings ignored. The morning of the tragedy began like any other. The sun was bright, the air thick with the scent of popcorn and sunscreen. Families streamed into the stadium, children clutching plush orca toys, parents balancing cameras. Behind the scenes, Daniel prepared with his usual calm. He patted the orca's slick skin during rehearsals, offered reassuring whistles, and checked his equipment. To him, it was another performance, another chance to share his love for these magnificent creatures. But beneath the water, unease rippled. Trainers noticed subtle red flags. The orca had refused part of its morning meal. It had circled restlessly, its movements sharper, more erratic than usual. The water churned as if something deep below was stirring. Yet no one called off the show. The seats were packed. The audience was waiting. The curtain of illusion would not be lifted. The performance began in dazzling fashion. Music thundered through the speakers as the orca launched itself skyward, crashing back down in a wave that drenched the front rows. Cheers erupted, cameras flashed, and laughter filled the air. Daniel smiled, his commands sharp, his posture confident. The bond between man and beast seemed unbreakable. To the audience, it was magic. To Daniel, it was love. But the magic was fragile. As Daniel knelt by the pool, reaching down for a routine interaction, the water stirred with unusual intensity. Trainers on the sidelines noticed. One whispered nervously, "Something's wrong." Daniel leaned closer, trusting, unguarded. Then, with terrifying speed, the orca surged upward, jaws snapping around him in one violent strike. Gasps exploded into screams. His microphone clattered onto the wet platform. His body was wrenched into the pool. The attack had begun. The water explodes in a furious whirl as the orca's jaws clamp tight around Daniel's torso. Gasps ripple through the stadium, 1,000 voices rising in disbelief before breaking into shrieks. His body disappears beneath the surface, only to reappear a second later as the predator thrashes, sending sheets of water crashing against the glass walls. Trainers on the sidelines freeze for half a breath, then panic ignites. Ropes are thrown, hands slap the water, shouts fill the air, but the orca does not listen. It is locked in a violent dance, one man against 6 tons of raw muscle and fury. In the first desperate seconds, Daniel bursts back to the surface, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. His arm waves frantically, fingertips clawing at the air, as if trying to grasp life itself. The crowd erupts in screams. Children cry into their parents' arms, while others stare, paralyzed, unable to comprehend what they are seeing. Trainers rush to the pool's edge, yelling commands, their voices cracking with terror. "Let him go! Let him go!" one trainer shouts, but the orca plunges down again, dragging Daniel beneath the water. The pool closes over him, leaving only violent ripples and a spreading froth of white. Seconds tick by with agonizing slowness. Then, the surface erupts again. The orca thrashes upward, Daniel still trapped in its jaws. His body jerks helplessly, tossed like a rag doll. Trainers hurl flotation devices, poles, and ropes, their movements frantic, but the predator ignores them all. The crowd's panic grows louder, a chaotic roar of terror. Daniel's scream cuts through it, raw, high, desperate, then muffled instantly as he is pulled back under. The water churns like a storm. Trainers bang the surface, blow whistles, clap, anything to break the orca's fixation. Nothing works. With terrifying force, the animal surges upward again, lifting Daniel clear of the water for a split second. His chest heaves, his body twitches, his face is stricken with pain and disbelief. Then the orca slams him back down, the crack of impact carrying across the stadium like a gunshot. Gasps collapse into silence, then erupt again into waves of hysterical screaming. Daniel surfaces once more, coughing violently, eyes bulging, gasping for breath. He raises a trembling arm, reaching for help. Some swear they heard him cry out in those moments, though the words are lost to the roar. Trainers lean dangerously over the pool's edge, extending poles, pleading for him to grab hold. The orca lunges again, jaws clamping tighter, dragging him away from safety. The water foams crimson now, thin streams of blood spreading into the blue. Parents shield their children's eyes. Some flee the stands, others cannot move, staring in horror. The orca drags Daniel in brutal circles, his body limp, legs trailing helplessly. Then it dives deep, holding him under. Seconds stretch into eternity. The water's surface is eerily still, empty of life. Then, with a violent surge, the predator erupts once more, tossing Daniel upward like prey, catching him again in its jaws. His body dangles motionless, and yet the orca continues to thrash, as if playing a cruel game. Witnesses later described it as unbearable, like watching a shark attack, only worse, because it was not happening in the wild, but in a stadium where families had come for wonder and joy. Emergency sirens wail as paramedics rush into the building, but they are powerless to intervene. They stand helpless as the orca parades its victim around the pool, ignoring every whistle, every command, every desperate attempt to distract it. The water, once crystal clear, is now streaked with red, each wave carrying evidence of the carnage. Trainers sob openly, their voices hoarse from screaming, their faces etched with despair. At last, after nearly 10 minutes of chaos, the orca releases its grip. Daniel's body floats face down, motionless, drifting toward the edge. Trainers scramble with nets and hooks, pulling him onto the platform. His chest is mangled, his skin torn, his body broken. Paramedics descend, working furiously, compressions, oxygen masks, injections, but the damage is catastrophic. His ribs are shattered, his organs crushed, his lungs filled with water. The fight for his life is over before it has truly begun. Silence falls across the stadium. The once cheerful arena has become a nightmare stage. The audience sits in shock, many weeping, others trembling, clutching loved ones. The orca circles below, calm now, its massive dorsal fin slicing through water that is stained a haunting crimson. For the families present, for the trainers who knew him, and for the world that would soon learn his name, the tragedy of Daniel Cross had just unfolded in front of their eyes. Paramedics worked with frantic urgency, but their faces told the truth before the words were spoken. Daniel's body was unresponsive. His chest had caved under the force of the orca's bite, his ribs shattered like brittle wood, his lungs filled with water. The bright red of his uniform was indistinguishable from the blood soaking it. Trainers gathered around, hands trembling, tears streaming, whispering prayers that would not be answered. Within minutes, the inevitable was declared. Daniel Cross was gone. The stadium remained frozen in shock. Families shuffled out silently, some children crying softly, others staring blankly as if unable to process what they had witnessed. Phones that had once been raised high to capture smiling dolphins and soaring orcas now trembled with footage of death. For many, it would be video too horrifying to ever watch again, yet impossible to erase from memory. Behind closed doors, the truth of the injuries was catalogued in a clinical, sterile environment that stood in sharp contrast to the raw chaos of the attack. The autopsy revealed devastation. His chest had been crushed, ribs fractured into jagged shards that punctured his lungs. Teeth marks carved deep valleys into his torso and limbs. Massive bruising covered his body, evidence of repeated thrashing. Water filled his airways, confirming that even after catastrophic trauma, he had drowned while trapped in the jaws of the animal he loved most. Every detail painted a portrait of violence no human body could withstand. Investigators descended quickly. The marine park, desperate to control the narrative, issued statements of sympathy, praising Daniel's dedication, calling him a beloved member of the family. But behind the carefully crafted words was panic. Records began to surface, warnings from trainers about the orca's erratic behavior, documented refusals to eat, logged instances of aggression. A history of near misses. Red flags ignored. Corporate negligence laid bare. The truth was unavoidable. Daniel's death was not a freak accident. It was the culmination of years of denial. News spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed across the globe. Orca kills beloved trainer. Tragedy at Marine Park. Images of Daniel smiling alongside the very creature that ended his life filled front pages. Social media erupted. Millions of comments flooded timelines, shock, sorrow, anger. Some mourned Daniel, others condemned the park, while many turned their outrage toward the system that kept apex predators confined for human entertainment. Outside the park's gates, vigils formed. Candles flickered against the night sky. Photos of Daniel, arms outstretched, smiling beside leaping dolphins, were surrounded by flowers and handwritten notes. Protesters stood alongside mourners, their signs bold and unflinching, blood in the water. End captivity now. Daniel deserved better. The chants grew louder with each passing day, demanding accountability, demanding change. Interviews with former employees painted an even darker picture. Trainers spoke of pressure to stay quiet, of management dismissing safety concerns, of being told to put on a smile even when they feared for their lives. One recalled, "We all knew it was only a matter of time. We just didn't know who it would be." The public divided sharply. Some blamed the orca, labeling it a killer. Others saw only the cruelty of captivity, the confinement that drove wild predators into madness. Documentaries dissected the footage, frame by frame, each second of Daniel's final struggle analyzed and replayed. The world was transfixed, horrified, unable to look away from the tragedy that had unfolded in broad daylight. Daniel's family, shattered by grief, demanded answers. How could a man who had devoted his life to animals be betrayed by the very institution that claimed to protect them? Their voices joined the swelling tide of outrage, pushing for investigations, for justice, for something to come from the senselessness of his death. Inside the park, morale collapsed. Trainers who once laughed and clapped alongside their orcas now moved with haunted eyes. Some resigned immediately, unable to face the water again. Others stayed, bound by contracts or fear of reprisal, but each carried the weight of trauma. For them, the pool had transformed from a stage into a grave. The Orca, meanwhile, remained in its tank. It swam its endless circles, calm now, its role as both star attraction and killer cemented in history. To some, it was a monster. To others, it was a victim, an apex predator reduced to a sideshow, its instincts twisted by confinement until tragedy was inevitable. The debate raged on, louder than ever, dividing communities, uniting activists, shaking the foundations of an entire industry. The world could not look away. 4 weeks after the attack, Daniel's story dominated headlines, television broadcasts, and dinner table conversations. He was remembered not only as a trainer, but as a dreamer, a boy who had once stared at the ocean with wonder, who had devoted his life to the creatures that now defined his legacy. Footage of him smiling, waving, and laughing with his orca companions was replayed alongside the horrifying images of his final struggle. The contrast was unbearable, a reminder of how quickly passion could turn to tragedy when ambition collided with denial. Experts filled the airwaves, their voices somber, their words cutting through the noise. Marine biologists explained that in the wild, orcas travel more than 100 miles a day, hunting, socializing, living in vast, complex pods. In captivity, they are confined to concrete pools barely a fraction of their natural range, forced into repetitive performances. Stress builds. Aggression festers. The inevitable happens. One scientist's words echoed louder than the rest. We are shocked when predators behave like predators, but we should be shocked at ourselves for expecting anything less. The protests grew. Outside the park, thousands gathered, holding signs, chanting Daniel's name. Documentaries were produced, each frame of his final moments dissected with brutal clarity. Audiences wept as they watched, torn between grief for the man and pity for the animal. The question could no longer be avoided. Who was truly at fault? The orca, or the people who put it there? For Daniel's family, the grief was endless. His mother clutched framed photos of her son, speaking softly about a boy who had always loved the sea. His friends and colleagues remembered a man of warmth, of laughter, of passion. His co-workers spoke of his fearlessness, but also of the unease they had felt leading up to that day. He trusted the animal completely, one admitted through tears, but he shouldn't have had to die for someone else's greed. Inside the park, silence reigned. Trainers who remained no longer smiled during performances. The water, once sparkling with choreographed leaps, now carried a weight, a reminder of the blood that had stained it. Some orcas refused to perform. Attendance dwindled. The image of joy had been shattered. Yet, even in death, Daniel's story carried meaning. It forced the world to confront its relationship with nature. It forced audiences to ask whether entertainment was worth the cost of human lives and animal suffering. And it forced an industry to face its darkest truths. The moral questions echo still. Can we claim to love animals while holding them captive? Can we justify risking human lives for fleeting moments of spectacle? And how many tragedies must unfold before change becomes unavoidable? The image of Daniel's final moments haunts those who saw it, but it also drives a call for something better. A world where children can still marvel at orcas, not in tanks, but in the wild where they belong. A world where men and women like Daniel can dedicate their passion not to performance, but to protection. Daniel Cross's dream was to live alongside the ocean, to connect with the creatures that inspired him. In the end, the ocean's fiercest hunter claimed him, but his story became more than a tragedy. It became a mirror, forcing humanity to see its reflection in the dark water, to reckon with its choices, to ask if the cost of entertainment is too high. The final image fades, Daniel, smiling, waving to a cheering crowd, unaware of the fate awaiting him. His laughter echoes one last time before silence takes its place. The water ripples. The lights dim. The story closes, but the questions remain. And so, we leave you with this truth. Nature is not a spectacle, but a force. It demands respect, not exploitation. It gives us wonder, but it also commands fear. Daniel Cross paid the ultimate price for our illusions. Let his story be the last reminder we ever need. If his final moments moved you, If his story shook you, share it. Speak his name. Carry his memory. Subscribe for more untold stories like this, because only by remembering the cost of our mistakes can we hope to avoid repeating them. Until next time, stay safe, respect the wild, and never forget Daniel Cross.